Hello, it's me, Jay, your DM. I use he, him.
I'm Jerika. I use she, her.
I'm Embers Tide. I use he, him.
And I am Aaron. I also use he, him.
And this is Inside Check, where we delve into the dungeon of your bad decisions and retrieve the treasure of wisdom, and I do the intro.
No!
Welcome back, everyone. Another week, another podcast, and I get to be on it this time.
Me too.
Yeah. It's been 2 weeks of small folk
D&D.
It's been 2 weeks of small folk small talk, potentially with a third serving, depending on how editing processes go.
And how hungry you are if you go back for more.
And a fourth serving if the stream happens, right?
Well, they are
But
small.
then there's
It's
a
more of
little bit of shame involved in the fourth serving.
Yeah, so fourth serving is a lot. You guys are going to be full of small folk. So we're going to get...
Sounds terrible.
They are tiny. It's like a content amuse-bouche.
Oh,
I've
God,
been
no.
a small folk, 3 small folk in a trench coat this whole time.
What? No wonder you kept skittering.
So, but the good news is that, you know, if you're feeling full up on small folk content, we've got some large fellows for you today in the form of monks.
It's like a sauna in here. Shit.
Yeah, and you know, I think actually most of our dungeon crawls are monk related, so I wanted to go ahead and introduce the topic at the top. And so, yeah, I mean, we're getting into a classic segment. Some of you may recall, if you're still listening to this from that far back, then I'm sorry. But the good news is that we still do this segment, and it's called Roll Call.
Roll.
We all have a different idea of how that segment is introduced.
Well, I have a special introduction for it if you want.
All right. Oh my God, we're so spoiled.
3, 2, 1, go. We're no strangers to monks, baby. Patient defense is superfly. Wholeness of body's what I'm thinking of. You wouldn't get this from Vecna's other eye, and I just want some AoE evasion. Gotta make you understand. Gotta love my drunkard's luck. My touch of death will make you down. Check out my eternal mountain defense too. Gonna hit with stunning strike. Never gonna tank the fight, even though I hit more times than I'm supposed to.
Rick roll call. Well
Rick
done,
roll
sir.
call. Hashtag monkey business.
Oh my God.
I've
You've
used
got to
all
get
eight.
the lyrics to me on that one. That one was really good.
Hit more times than I'm supposed to is mwah, a spicy Italian hand
Vecna's
kiss.
other eyes.
Is all,
Yeah,
yes.
Vecna's other eye was really good. I think that like when you said Vecna's other eye, that's like when the song went from like here to like here.
Okay,
And my hand is
to, like,
gesturing
awesome.
from a size to like a higher size.
From a medium to...
Yeah, I'm making a hand gesture here that doesn't communicate across this audio platform we've chosen to communicate via. And the audio platform is not demonstrating that my hand is lower now, but then it gets higher now. And that's
Mistakes
talking
were
about higher
made.
success. Yeah. So
It's
anyway,
okay. I think you gave a good roadmap to explain
I made sure people could, you know, work it out in their own time.
your pantomime on podcast. Mm-hmm. So let's talk monks.
Okay, let's talk about monks. Let's talk. Well, first of all, let's do a dungeon crawl where we discuss monk-related things that are not technically the class itself or questions.
Oh.
So we're gonna talk. We got some dungeon crawls. Folks have dungeon crawls. Jerika, I believe you specifically had a pretty compelling dungeon crawl.
Jerika show.
Let's get crawling.
Jerika dungeon. I would like to talk about at POC Gamers' exciting statement about their feeling about the state of monks in D&D. And I will be reading their words, and these words are 100% theirs and not mine. D&D take. Monks should be rebranded to martial artist to remove the Orientalism aspects, and the ascetic aspects should be shunted to a subclass to reflect the dedication involved in that life path. Make them dedicated melee combat, high HP, low AC, high damage. Additionally, as a follow-up in this amazing thread, so this suggestion also means that the martial arts of the world open up to non-Asian ones. And there are a lot of non-Asian martial arts that are dope AF and that would set D&D on fire. I'm talking pancration using wrestlers taking down an ogre chief, or a capoeira user hauling ass on a dragon. Because at the moment, monks are thoroughly Asian coded in every way in game, which becomes a world building problem very quickly. Because seriously, there's more to being Asian than samurai, ninja, and ascetic monks, but you wouldn't know that with how D&D has been rolling lately. So I think this is an amazing suggestion. I believe Danny Hartel retweeted the first tweet saying that D&D should basically pay POC Gamer for this idea because it's an amazing idea. Basically taking Asian-coded martial arts, aka monk, and making it into a subclass of martial artist, and then having other types of martial arts also represented. I think it's a really good idea.
Absolutely.
I think it's a fantastic idea.
Yes.
I mean, this is my opinion, and it doesn't need to be anyone else's, but in my opinion, this is one of those ideas that I categorize in the process to unfuck Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes.
As D&D was initially fucked up by Gary Gygax in some ways, on and off. Guy did a lot of great stuff, right? Not going to contest it. But I think the original inspiration from the OG Dungeons and Dragons monk was more of like a Kiefer Sutherland in 24 or John Wick kind of, or even like Ryu or Ken from Street Fighter, in that they were fully modern, cosmopolitan, not geographically specified, but they were kind of ascetic fighters. It was like a hitman concept. It's like someone who's dedicated to that martial vocation isn't gonna, they're not going to adorn themselves with Gaston-esque kind of like fighter rep in town. Like they're just going to do their thing and move on. I think it's when Gygax brought it into Oriental Adventures as a playing class, they adjusted and contorted all of that secret agent hitman type stuff into the hard-coded, like Dead Sea Scroll hard-coded Asian tokenism of that rule book. And y'all just don't need any of that to have a great playable class.
I mean, just like if you look at some of these things, like a capoeira based like fighting class would be rad as hell. Like, yeah, I want to see spinning and kicking.
There's already an example of how the current system doesn't really allow for adaptation to alternative fighting styles. One of the main popular subclasses that's not Wizards of the Coast official, probably the most popular third-party class right now, is the Pugilist, which is just a monk that's more based around fist fighting and boxing than martial arts. And it's like, how do we have a martial arts class that isn't broad enough to fit a boxer?
Yeah.
Like, it seems like every other class you can adapt so fluidly. Like a cleric, you have, wizard clerics, you have healing clerics, you have death clerics. With monks, you have death monks, and you have monks that are like pacifists, and then you have monks, but like you can't do a monk that's like a boxer. It's just like a different style of one specific niche, right? It's very, very strange to me how, like, with a fighter, you have the chivalrous knight fighter is one example of the fighter. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have a fighter who is sort of, I'm trying to think of what the most opposite.
The arcane archer, I think, is probably because they're ranged based. They got magical options. Yeah.
The cavalier or the samurai. I mean, like, you can even work in different cultures, like within the subclasses. Like you can take those into different cultural areas, but with the monk, the culture's built into level 1. And so it's like very specific how it descends down. So you have like the Way of Death monk, which is just a monk who learned like death techniques, and the Way of the Open Palm monk, which is just a monk who learned like open palm techniques. But there's no boxer monk. There's no way to build that into the class to remove the asceticism and the physical perfection training that you do in the way of a monk. There's no way to remove that from so even from a mechanical standpoint, it's just bad design.
Right. So it's like if you're building a fighter and it were a car, you could get a coupe, a convertible, a sports car, an SUV. But for a monk, it feels like I'm going to get a Toyota Corolla and maybe I can pick the interior and the color. It's still going to be a Toyota Corolla.
Yeah. I mean, like, for real though, if I'm sitting down to make a fighter, I can sit down and be like, I want to make a fighter who is a field medic from a war. And I can do that. Like, I can pick the feats, maybe I'll take the old medic feat that's not official, but it's useful. I can pick different feats and skills that make my fighter more medic-y, and I can pick different subclasses that lend themselves to giving me more of an action economy. But with the monk is like you are one thing, but with like a different expression of that, like a different color, like a different skin. Almost, it's not like like you're playing an RPG and you can change the outfit.
It's like different DLC.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't feel as distinctive. The one that is the most different is the Way of Four Elements. And even that is very much like...
Because Avatar is coded within a very kind of Asiatic
it's very
context.
Much in that vein.
Yeah. There is a lot to be said about the unfucking of D&D. Like, we've talked a little bit about it in previous episodes, but terms like race... instead of maybe ancestry, or even the term barbarian. I've seen some conversation on Twitter about how that is a very culturally loaded term. Yeah.
I think the long and short of it is, though, from a sensitivity standpoint, it's not ideal. Mm-hmm. It's not good. And then from a mechanical standpoint, it's also not good. And so at that point, if it's not good mechanically and if it's not good narratively, then what is the point of maintaining this tradition?
It's true.
Do you think maybe they feel a little bit kind of boxed in a way?
Well, yeah, a lot of designing Dungeons and Dragons is iterating on existing material and maintaining the feeling of a class and of a Dungeons and Dragons game. But I think the thing is, like, I don't feel like the monk is a core tenet of Dungeons and Dragons. I don't think when you sit down to play Dungeons and Dragons and you have imagined that in your mind, I don't think that the first thing you jump to is a monk. I think you're more likely to think of wizards and knights and of sorcerers and of the barbarians. The monk is definitely a classic class. It's been there for a long time, since 1975. But I don't think that it is untouchable in the way that like ability scores are untouchable. They're just core to the feeling of Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Yeah, I mentioned it because I think if you look, I remember when I started playing D&D with AD&D 2E, I think the only way you could play a monk was a kit on a cleric. Like I know that the monks trace back to the original D&D and it was one of the original kind of like 5 playable classes. But at one point they did kind of like take it out and take it like long ago, remove it from being one of the classes.
They pulled these things out and put them back in multiple times on almost all of these classes. I believe Rogue used to be a fighter subtype. It's like...
I want to say... I've brought up that article from the 538 where they were looking at D&D Beyond's data to figure out which was the least played class. And basically Monk and Bard are essentially tied for in third place for least played class. Sorcerer is the second least played, and Jerika, I don't want to tell you what the least played class is in the game.
Is it Druid?
It is.
Am I special?
You are.
Yeah, that's what you said last time you heard this stat too, actually. Oh, wow. That's a callback.
I don't like to follow the crowd.
Yeah, and I'm almost certain that those numbers have changed.
I wouldn't be surprised because it's fighter, rogue, wizard in the top 3. And I believe we know now that wizard has been usurped by warlock, which is...
Yeah, it's in that battle, that back and forth battle with warlock. Let's talk a little bit about multi-classing monks, because we got into a conversation about this earlier, Aaron.
Oh, big time.
Where you were talking about, like, monks are basically a pain in the ass when it comes to
I always thought like wizards are probably the most difficult class too multi-class because no one else
because there's
uses
no other
int.
int caster.
Yeah. Aside from like
Yeah.
the very niche cases of like an Eldritch Knight or an Arcane Trickster, but at least...
Well, now there's Artificer as well, which is actually somewhat
Is that official?
of a
Or is that still UA?
It's still UA, but they've released a second UA of it now, so
It's got
pretty certain it's getting close to becoming official.
And that's good, because there's definitely going to be some synergy there, because
they released 2 more subclasses just today on the Artificer.
I gotta look this up.
Yeah, and they did a revision on the stuff that was in there, so they added some more spells from Xanathar's Guide to Everything.
But I was saying, like, I was trying to mix one with a ranger, so you'd be able to throw like
right, because you were thinking melee needs to mix with melee.
Yeah,
and that's kind of where your hangup was coming from. And I was like, but actually, Druid weirdly makes an amazing multi-class.
And I was like, well, no, because when you become the creature, you just become the creatures. And then that one little bullet point of if your class features will still work with it, they work with it. And I was like, oh my God, Jay invented the Kung Fu Panda build, and holy shit, it's viable.
Yeah, and it's legit.
It's legit.
Because your unarmored defense still works. You just use the beast's dexterity instead of your own.
Right.
But beasts usually have at least an 11 or 12 in dexterity, so it's not going to be bad.
Yep. Martial arts and flurry of blows.
It specifically says in the text that you can use things like a headbutt or a kick to make your unarmed strike. So even if you have claws for hands and that technically is a natural weapon and wouldn't count, you can headbutt and still get that unarmed strike damage.
You turn into a horse and do the back kick.
Yeah, if you're a snake, you can headbutt them.
Yeah,
it's fine.
Yeah,
it's in the rules.
You can whip them with the tail. Yeah,
it's in the rules.
You can still catch ammunition as long as you have hands, because all it says is that you need an empty hand.
No, I actually don't think it does, because I looked at it and when because we were joking like I'm in my beast form and I catch it in my maw, and I was only half kidding. Hold on, let's look at
let's not get into reading the rules right now. But the point is that almost every single feature of the monk works with the wild shape and is actually improving the wild shape. Unarmored defense covers up a major weakness of a wild shape, which is that you don't have very good AC while you're in a wild shape. Almost all of them have an AC of around 11 to 13. Unarmored defense with your +5 whiz that you get to keep no matter what form you're in will work, give you a +5 on top of your 10. So that's a minimum 15. Plus, if your beast has any dex score bonus at all, that gets added on top.
So I just want to point it out, going back to the original point Jerika brought up from POC Gamer on Twitter is, we have tried for maybe like 5 seconds, and I feel like we've opened up an entire Disney-sized vault of cool shit that expands way beyond the monk as written. And we had to go sniffing around for it like it was a truffle. But it's really awesome. It's there. The rules complement it. I think it makes the case really well. And this is just, a few minutes of thought. You find really cool shit.
I feel super guilty because when I was talking to Jay about it, I was like, oh, it could be like a Shaolin master that studied all the animal forms and they've mastered it to the point that they actually become animals. Even I Asiatically coded it.
That's not your fault. That's the way that's the flavor that the book puts in there. So you can't be blamed for that. Again, it's baked into the core of the class is ascetic monk lifestyle. So that's not our fault. Like, they have to change the class.
I absolutely...
monk should be a subclass of the martial artist class.
That's absolutely,
which would make
cool.
everything a lot simpler. And you could just maintain a lot of the stuff. Like, unarmored defense makes sense for all martial artists. Mm-hmm. Like, that has nothing to do with an ascetic lifestyle. That's just
attack, stunning,
that's just you being tough.
Stunning strike, even like if you want to make a boxer, that's the kidney shot.
Yeah,
that's
a
the
stunning
dirty
strike
boxing.
makes sense for boxer, makes sense for martial artists, makes sense for pretty much everybody. The things you mainly have to get rid of is that like way of the blah blah blah.
Your
that,
body is timeless.
That timeless body, that kind of stuff where it's also that very mysticism based stuff. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, that's why the druid was such a brilliant thing, because you can basically drop strength or dex because your animal form is going to
once you get dex to 13, so you can multi-class, then you don't have to worry about dex anymore because it's all going to come from your wild shapes.
Yep. And I was just playing around with one like a totem barbarian, because really you only need the 14 strength, but a totem barbarian druid would have the animal forms, and these animal forms are taking half damage. So you're now stretching your temporary HP pool. You're doubling that. So super tanky.
All right, that's a completely different
I know,
episode.
we're no longer talking about monks, and I'm completely off topic, but there's some really fun stuff there.
No. But I mean, multiclassing is awesome. We'll probably have to do another episode of multiclassing at some point because it is just fun to theory craft these combinations. Like part of the annoyance I know you had at one time with subclasses having all these different flavors is it kind of like de-emphasized multiclassing because it's like, oh, I don't have to multiclass. I can just subclass into all these millions of different subclasses that have all the flavor I could ever want. But I think that the thing about multiclassing is the you really have to like rules interactions. And that's a very niche set of person. Just the two of us.
Yeah, that is the probably that niche is the fulcrum of our friendship.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, getting on to the main topic at hand. Let's talk about monks, baby.
Let's talk about
Dex and me. Monks originally coming from a rules document called Blackmore in 1975. Monks were introduced as a new playable class, kind of, I guess. I mean, so classes in this edition are weird. There's not a whole lot to them. First of all, even back then, you have they're actually introduced with assassins. They're introduced alongside assassins, but even back then, you have this sort of baked-in asceticism stuff. This very Asian monk kung fu movie flavor. Their class names are Novice, Initiate, Disciple, Immaculate, Master, Grandmaster, Grandmaster of Dragons, Grandmaster of the North Wind, Grandmaster of the West Wind, etc., etc. The picture of a monk is a weird old man with his hand out covered in energy and a bucket on his back flowing with energy. It's very strange. Basically, as a monk in this edition of the game, you get a armor class that doesn't rely on armor, so unarmored defense. Way back in the very first iteration, this was still here. Your armor class was just a number, 9, 8, 7, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, et cetera, et cetera. So you don't have to worry about your armor, which is nice back in those editions because a huge part of the game was saving up money to buy equipment, so they didn't have to. Your movement was higher than everybody else's, and it got to be like ridiculous. It got to be like at the end, a monk's movement was basically 3 or 4 times what everybody else is. Everybody else got 10 inches.
Pretty
and they
much
got
the
34.
same in like 5e as well. It's just it gets like I think plus 40.
They got really,
feet.
really good armor class at high levels. And then the other thing that they got was they got a bunch of attacks with their dominant hand. So they went from 1 hit to 1 offhand hit, 1 hit to 1 offhand hit, 1 hit to 1 offhand hit. And then it goes up to 3-2, 3-2. And then their open hand damage increases over time as well. So it goes from a D4 at level 1, and then at the end of the game, you end up with 4d10 for your open hand damage. Yeah, so that's basically your monk in a nutshell. That was all you got back then. But you see a lot of this stuff carries through to today. You still have your unarmed damage that increases over time. You still have more attacks than everyone else. You still have unarmored defense, and you still have boosted movement. So they've maintained this through line, and then they've just added on as other classes have gotten more. Because what I see reading this is that, man, this is a boring class. There's not a lot to do here. You have extra attacks, and you have good armor.
More, yeah.
Yeah, you're probably decent in combat, but like there's not a lot. Here's a fun fact. It's just something I learned reading about this, and I wanted to share with you real quick. And this is the last thing I'll go over at the origins of this. When you hit 6th level, there is only one monk in the world above you for each rank. So once you hit Grandmaster, there's only one Grandmaster of Dragons, one Grandmaster of Northwind, one Grandmaster of Westwind, one Grandmaster of Southwind, etc., etc. There's only one, and you have to hunt them down and defeat them in combat to become the next level.
Oh, that is some old school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you lose the fight, you drop down a level. Yeah. So you have to go. You're level 6. You're going to level 7. You want to become the Grandmaster of the North Wind. So you have to go find the Grandmaster of the North Wind, defeat them in combat, and if they beat you, you go back down until you level back up.
Don't you start with you have to start with the Grandmaster of the South Wind, because like that's
it is the Grandmaster of Dragons first, then Northwest, Southeast.
Because I was going to say Grandmaster of the South Wind is just a fart joke. He should probably be the first person you have to. He, she, they.
The highest ranking monk, by the way, is the Grandmaster of Flowers, which I thought was interesting.
Ooh, flowers.
Kind of cute, I guess.
I'll put this bouquet on your gravestone.
Yeah, I'll put this bouquet on you before you even know you got it.
Well, we've got some questions here. I'm going to kick it off with one right from the Discord. Our good friend Ooze the Moose. I'm going to cue it up.
Cue that cue.
Tee up the cue.
From our good friend Ooze the Muse out of the Discord asking, the monk capstone ability at level 20 is a bit, ellipsis, lackluster, period space. How would you spice the capstone ability up / rework it, since you know at level 20 you're basically a god?
Yeah, Jerika.
Me?
Yeah, I've talked a lot.
Spicing up. Well, and what is this ability now?
So the capstone ability of the monk is if you start a battle with no key, you just automatically go up to 1.
4, but you get some more key points if you don't have any, even though they recharge on a short rest.
Oh, it's 4? Well, that's slightly better.
Slightly better. It's kind of just boring. It's a Ritz cracker. It's dry.
I mean, I feel like you could spice that up by adding some sort of summon ability where like
you would.
Yeah, I would. But for some reason I'm channeling Duck at the moment. But instead of like a demon, you summon like a benevolent monstrosity that like embodies your way of being.
Yeah. So maybe like some sort of like
immaculate leprechaun. By leprechaun, I mean leopard.
For example, one of your abilities you get at a certain level is to astral project. Your capstone ability could be that while you're astral projected, maybe you can fight. That could be kind of cool.
You trade places with your summon, and then your summon fights for you.
Was there any kind of ability that would let you kind of have a shadow fighter of yourself and kind of dupe yourself?
Shadow clone jutsu.
So basically, are you asking, are there JoJo stands?
Yes.
Are there JoJo stands?
Stands, yes. I mean,
there
mirror images that can fight? Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you essentially duplicate your strikes. So now you're gonna roll like 24 attacks or something.
Yeah.
See, to me, that's the obvious answer: is to give you like what does a person who's playing a monk enjoy about being a monk? They get to punch a shitload of times. Let them punch a shitload of times. Let them punch 8 times around. Why does it matter at level 20?
Well, like I remember in Critical Role when Marisha Ray's character got
you mean Bo?
Beauregard, yes, the one and the only Bo. She got to use her fists as magical weapons, and she was like, "I can punch ghosts now." And that was like,
you can punch ghosts into next week.
Yeah, and like just the excitement that she had for her character in that moment reverberated through the entire D&D community. It was great.
Give Casper a black eye.
Right. Like you can punch. Now you can punch anything. And then you can astral project. You can punch in another dimension. And then you can give corporeal form to that astral projection and have it stand beside you and double punch. Just kind of gives you a snowball
effect. And then you fist bump each other and the world.
I like this JoJo stand monk.
I like the
created.
idea of like giving them like the clone spell, except it's instantaneous but lasts like a minute or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like your
Because it's like, what's the paladin get? The paladin gets like big wings
angel
and glowy
wings and
yeah.
depending on their oath, like friggin' immunity to everything or
So like, I mean, go ham. Why not? Here's what I say. I say you have this ability. 1 minute, your soul projects out of your body. You and your body fight together. Now you can attack 3 times with your main attack, and when you use your flurry of blows, you get an extra 3 attacks instead of 2. And now you get 6 strikes in a round, and you're just like a machine gun.
And think of the aggregate board movement that you would have. All that crazy monk movement with 2 points on a board.
We race around the room 3 times, then go to the bad guy and hit him. Yeah.
The ability to fly would be good too, I guess.
Which, I mean, if you're one of the 4
it's a
elements,
natural progression running up walls to just running up the air.
Yeah, 4 elements they have one of their elemental disciplines is they get the fly spell. But having it just be a general thing for all monks would be rad.
So can I challenge y'all to a game that I had not planned and I just thought of, and I think it might be amusing?
Okay.
Who is your favorite monk from media, pop culture, real or imaginary, cartoons, movies, books, anything?
Gabrielle from Xena.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I could see that. She's got kind of she's peaceful,
She's a
but
fighter
she,
vibe, but I really, because especially towards the end of the series, she gets really spiritual.
Yeah.
I would say she's actually a monk.
Yeah, that is a good call. I was going to say Kwai Chang Caine from Kung Fu.
Very nice.
Very, wandering around, helping people, ascetic, like he's kind of the classic one. Daredevil, maybe? I don't know if Daredevil, maybe Rogue, maybe, he's martial arts trained.
Daredevil is so legit. I think that is a great concept. They're not brought to you as a monk. But when you think back, but after this conversation we've had, there are all of these monks in sheep's clothing that are kind of popping to my mind.
If you could, if we had like a revision of the monk as less of a monk and more of a martial artist, it would be cool to be able to play characters like.
Just say Goku. You can say it, Jay. It's okay.
No, I don't. First of all, you can already
play
make
Goku.
It's the way of the sun soul. But no, I don't want to play Goku. Although actually,
Okay, my third runner-up is John Wick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gun kata.
Yeah.
Yes.
See, that's another thing that should be possible to do in the game.
Yeah.
Absolutely yes. Absolutely
like
yes.
Grammaton cleric. Yeah.
Gun
Yeah.
kata.
I want to play John Preston. I know
Now
far
I want
too
to make
much
a
about
gun kata
equilibrium.
subclass.
My number 2 is probably Po from Kung Fu Panda. And my number 1,
Good boy.
Sonic the Hedgehog.
This is not the Sonic song.
Too soon? Too soon? Too timely? Too topical?
Sonic is a monk. That's my take.
He is the
Sonic the Hedgehog?
Sonic
Yeah.
the
Definitely
Hedgehog.
runs with more than 2 feet.
So I guess you make a tabaxi monk. They can double their speed once every other round.
I'm sorry,
so
Jay.
you
My
could-
homebrew hedgehog class is ready to release on DM's Guild. I was working on it for small folk.
Listen, I could go to D&D Wiki right
Yeah.
now and find you a Sonic the Hedgehog class, all right? Listen, I promise you it's out there. People love that hog, all right?
Yeah.
People are crazy about that hog.
God. He says things sometimes.
That hog?
Oh, Jay.
He's high on the hog.
He's high on the hog.
All right, yeah, I'm getting high on that hog. He's about to be on the movies.
He's supposed to be on the news. Once they
gonna be in
reanimate
movies.
every frame of him, yes.
Yes.
All right, so the next question we have rocking and rolling here is something I think we've already kind of addressed, but has 5e fixed the balance problem for the monk at all? So this is coming from, oh wow, that was fast. This is coming from the RPG section of Stack Exchange by user Miniman. Just saying, in 3.5e in Pathfinder, the monk had a lot of problems. Has 5e addressed them? I would say by and large, they have, I know monks in previous editions were very multi-attribute like they needed strength and dex and con and whiz. So they've definitely cleared that up. Yeah, what else, Jay?
In previous editions of the game, having multiple attacks was not as special as it is now. Every class got more attacks as they leveled up, including the wizard eventually. So yeah, it was a level-based thing where you would have X number of attacks per round, and as you went up in level, you would get more attacks per round. So in that edition of the game, having more attacks per round wasn't as special. And more importantly, attack damage could never keep pace with what wizards were doing and what other characters were doing in the battlefield. The way that they could shift dramatically the battlefield. Monks didn't really have a means of doing that. So 5th edition, they added Stunning Strike, which is huge for the balance of the monk. A lot of the monk hinges on the ability to just shut down enemies, which is why, every time Matt Mercer groans about the Stunning Strike getting off and paralyzing his boss, I'm like, Matt, that's what she does. That's her only thing. That's what Bo does. Like, don't be mad at Bo for doing the one thing they gave monks that makes them really cool. But as a DM, there's always that my toy got broken. I'm so frustrated. I made this really cool boss, and now they don't get to do anything. They're going to die. It's lame. I digress. The fact that extra attacks are rare in this edition, so almost every class except for Fighter has 2 attacks max, and they have 3 attacks all the time, 4 attacks when they want to. Really, really helps in this edition and attacks do a lot more damage in this edition than they did previously, and spells do a lot less damage in this edition than they did previously. So it's gone a long way towards bringing those things into parity. A monk doing 4 attacks can easily do as much damage as a fireball does, or more. But it's all single target focus damage as opposed to AoE. Of course, still taking into account the issues I have with the theming of the mechanics and the fact that the mechanics aren't very flexible flavor-wise. But as far as parity and balance goes, it's good.
That leads pretty much directly into our next set of questions, which
I just tanked that question. Sorry, everybody else.
No, this is a perfect segue because we have been talking about how we feel somewhat trapped by the kind of Orientalism that is kind of plagued the class. But I found a few questions of people who are taking the monk class and its subclasses and getting, dare I say, incredibly creative with them. So here's a question coming from Tommy off of the RPG section of Stack Exchange. This came up as a controversial topic at my table with a player creating a Zangief-style play style for their character. Zangief from Street Fighter, the big Russian wrestler guy. The player uses an Aarakocra monk that flies up with a grappled enemy, then ends his movement to fall to the ground, spinning as he does. He uses his reaction to slow fall, so he takes almost no damage, whereas the enemy takes all the falling damage. Now, is the monk actually falling more slowly? And if they're holding someone, that person's also falling slowly? Or is it that the monk just when they land is able to land in such a way as to, reduce their damage, whereas the person they're holding is not? But essentially Zangief's signature move in Street Fighter is he grabs you, he leaps up into the air, he spins around and then drives your head into the ground. So this person, essentially found a way to do that in D&D.
So, attack 1 would be grapple, and then you would use your movement to jump.
Fly, because they're an Aarakocra.
Okay, yeah, so you fly up, and then you
Step of the wind to go even higher.
And then you go down as fast as possible to crash them into the surface of the earth.
Yeah.
Listen, first of all, I applaud the creativity. Very interesting combat style.
It reminds me of birds that mate by going up really high and then coming down really fast.
Wait, what?
Basically, you're just coming onto your mate. Peregrine falcon, for example, I'm trying to find the word.
Or like those birds who drop rocks on turtles to crack their shells.
No, that's not it at all.
I feel the earth move under your head.
Just no.
I think it's called stooping. Sorry,
Stooping. I love this.
I'm in a Googling spiral here.
It's okay.
Bird fucking.
Whoa.
You're not wrong.
That's what our podcast is about now. Bird fucking.
Stoop.
There's a demographic.
Jerry Holkins, get at us.
No, hang on. We're not fucking birds. We're talking about birds.
The high-speed attack dive of a bird of prey. Okay. Never mind. It's fucking. It's not fucking.
Never mind, it's not bird fucking. We take back our previous bit.
But anyway, it's stooping. Not stooping.
Oh, that is the best. But I get the potential rules lawyer controversy of slow falling to reduce your damage, but incurring the full damage on the opponent.
Just let him go.
But
just drop him.
You're basically picking someone up and throwing him down. But you want the Zangief flavor, and I get that.
Right, so,
you got to go for that flavor. So why not just make it a high DC acrobatics check as a part of your attack?
To me, I think if the mechanic's already there for you to avoid damage, then you should just avoid damage.
I was actually impressed, or in negotiating and adjudicating doing this move, I was impressed that the player said, I will use this tool that's in my class. I will do the slow fall. I use this ability to do it, as opposed to, I'm a bird monk and I kick ass. I should just be able to do this.
They obviously have a DM who is rules as written instead of rule of.
Well, even rule as written. It's just the name is slow fall. It actually doesn't. All it says is you can use your reaction when you fall to reduce any falling damage. So you could flavor that however you want. I land on him. Like, yeah.
That's why I like the idea of an acrobatics check, is like you're trying to maneuver your opponent under you, which they're going to struggle to prevent. And you want to land on that sucker. And if you pull it off, total conveyance of damage because you a martial arts master.
I think for me, if you have the slow fall to avoid damage and you have the choice to just drop them to take the full damage, at that point as a DM, you are relieved of the burden of trying to maintain the rules. They have every tool in their inventory. If they want to flavor it a different way, then just let them flavor it a different way.
Yeah.
But like all the rules are there for them to avoid the damage while getting to pile drive them. Just let them pile drive them. Probably thematically, slow fall is meant to emulate the weird thing in martial arts movies where the person like floats to the ground on wire flu or whatever.
Yeah.
I just really appreciate that someone brought this idea into my head because it's rad.
Yeah, it's good. I like when players do stuff like this where they use alternative options in combat.
Yes.
Like, use the shove attack to knock a person off a wall instead of just fighting them to the death. Stuff like that is always clever and worthy of reward.
Well, speaking of such, that's our next kind of inventive monk player is a Way of Shadows monk. And they're 6th level, so they have the Shadow Step ability, which lets them, as a bonus action, teleport 60 feet. So long as they're in an area of dim light or darkness, they can teleport 60 feet to another area of dim light or darkness. So this DM is asking for quick context. I have a character in my group who's got special powers. They're a human with shadow-based magic, which includes teleporting between shadows. To do this, they took the Way of Shadow Monk. He swirls a large cape around himself, releases the button that holds it around his neck, then ducks down flat below it. The cape's pretty large and swirls pretty close to the ground, creating pretty dark shadows around him. He then teleports away to a nearby shadow he could see from below the falling cape. Should I allow a Way of Shadows monk to do this? So essentially they create their own area of darkness and disappear Houdini style, and the cape just lies flat. I thought that was rad as hell.
Yeah, I think it sounds cool. I'm in favor of anything that makes a niche ability more accessible to the player. There's not always big shadows in a room when you need it. So if they want to use their cape, and it self-regulates, right? Because the player is ducking down below the cape gets left behind in the teleport. So they can only do it once.
Well, the other thing is they also, before that, get shadow arts where they get the darkness spell. So they could just be like 60 feet away, pop a spot, I'm gone.
Yeah, I don't see any problem with that.
Yeah.
Houdini monk.
Tastes good.
Monkeos.
Double the flavor, half filling.
Coming again from our Discord, Matt Will Jackson asks, monk subclasses, on the whole, do you feel they struggle to reflect their themes in their mechanics or vice versa? I think that talking about the kind of narrow Orientalism base of a lot of these things, I think they hit their mark in those things. I don't think they're as broad as they certainly could be. But, a Kensai monk, is a weapons monk. Open hand monk is doing all that cool kind of kung fu shit. They're tripping you and kicking you 15 feet away and hitting you with a 5-finger death punch.
Jerika, you haven't played a monk, right?
I did.
You did play a monk? What appeals to you about the monk class?
So I played Snippet as a monk.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, the Mojang.
And why I thought that was interesting was because I wanted Snippet to have some sort of prescience in the form of a yoga ritual. I don't know. There's something interesting to me about Modrons and trying to bend into weird shapes that they don't do well, but they try really hard. So I thought that like a yogi would fit well with monk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think yoga has a similar sort of dedication to form and ritual that is similar to the
Yoga
flavor that's already built into the monk.
Yeah.
I think that the monk captures the vibe of what it is trying to capture, which is those wire fu kung fu movies. I think that it captures that fine. I just think that the monk could be broader and cast a wider net, which we've already gone over in depth. I mean, there's no real good way to make a boxer. There's no
jiu-jitsu, grappling.
Yeah, a judo expert, a throws expert. Yeah. That would be really cool, actually.
I do want to say, like, almost all the monastic kind of traditions, the ways of X, Y, and Z, I think do capture, like, Way of Shadow is very ninja, Way of Four Elements is very Avatar: The Last Airbender, Sun Soul is very Goku Ryu. The only one that doesn't really land for me is the Way of the Drunken Master.
Yeah, because it's like you're an ascetic monk who's like totally dedicated to your body and form, but you're also like a drunk guy.
And I get it because there's those Jackie Chan Drunken Master
the Jackie Chan
movies.
But again, that goes to the limitations of the form that they set.
Yes,
but doesn't it also kind of speak to a change in, I don't know, like a role-play-esque change in the character's ideals?
Yeah.
In some ways?
Yeah.
I'm sure you can rectify it.
Yeah, you can probably play it to a greater extent, but I think that they would have gotten a better drunken master out of a martial artist class than they have gotten out of the monk class.
Right.
Getting back to Matt's question, though, is like, does he feel that the mechanics really represent the context? And a lot of it is like, it doesn't really speak to that. Like, I would have expected, like, you imbibe something and it gives you some sort of bonus or buff.
Like, where's the drinking?
Yeah, where's the sipping on the rice wine? Again, this is super stereotypical.
Man, air, come on.
Yeah, I'm thinking of like Virtua Fighter and all those fighting games I played as a kid where that was absolutely...
This is all like Samurai Showdown archetypes in my head too.
Yeah.
Like
my drunken master monk Sona would only get drunk on apple cider.
Well, I would drink a drunken master soda.
Like their first ability, Drunken Technique, like it lets them run away. They do flurry of blows, and then they get to run away for free. Like, when I think of the Drunken Master, it's like they're dodging and weaving right in front of the person, and they can't put a hand on them because it's so weird.
That's the, like, level 5 ability or 6 ability where you can, like, redirect blows.
Yeah.
Trying to capture that flavor, but, like...
The thing I'd love to see in a Drunken Master is, like, at a very high level, okay, you get knocked to the ground, you're unconscious, you immediately spring back up. You're back up and you're rolling. Maybe you roll at disadvantage or something like that. But just the notion
I can see the Drunken Master, like the whole idea of the Drunken Master is like they're fluid and flexible.
Yeah.
They bend so they don't break. Right. So they could even theoretically have something like a Barbarian's Rage where they're resistant to damage at a certain point,
Yeah. Something about like a temporary AC buff like the Kensai has to kind of represent the... when I'm in this state, I'm just impossible to lay a hand on.
Give them the rogues uncanny dodge.
Yeah,
that's a great option.
That would be great.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that they've captured one vibe really well, which is the aesthetic monk.
Yeah.
The problem is that because they narrowed their focus, no other class is like that. Though,
yeah, they built so much on top of that one narrow pillar.
Barbarian is problematic in its own way because the word barbarian is kind of like...
Yeah, true.
But like berserker. Let's call it berserker. The berserker is a archetype, and there are a bunch of different kinds of berserkers you can make. You can make the person who just like loses themselves in the heat of combat, or you can make the person who like has honed their rage into a weapon, or you can make a person who has like such an intense dedication to their techniques that they lose focus on everything else and they're just focused on their skills. You can almost make a martial artist out of berserker.
In Pathfinder 2, like there was a pugilist path for the barbarian.
Yeah, and so a pugilist path for barbarian. Remind me, that's a homebrew I need to make later. But like we've already went over this. For every other class, it's like a very archetypal, simple seed, and then you get to, with the subclasses, hone that into your desired flavor. The POC gamer has come out here with just an obvious home run. Like, this is so simple in retrospect to look at that like they have really missed the boat on a wider net here.
Yes, but you, player, don't have to.
You don't.
Yeah, we're gonna make it. We're gonna make it.
Now
For
you know the rest of the story, which is that ever since Air mentioned Tub Thumper, I've been doing Tub Thumper in my head, but for Bird Fucker.
Bird fucker.
You fuck a corvid bird.
You fuck a pelican. You fuck a peregrine.
What have we wrought?
I'm just gonna compile every bird fucker reference into one master reference at the end.
It'll be long enough you can make it its own serial podcast.
Goodbye, everyone.
And that was bird fucking check.
This was in-flight check.
In-flight check. We're not going to do any better than that. Everyone hit stop.
And that was Insight Check, where we definitely made some bad decisions today and delved right into them. Didn't even walk away. Could have stopped, didn't. If you enjoyed it for some reason, go ahead and give us a rating on iTunes. I'd appreciate that. Thank you so much to Amy T. Falcone for being associated with this mess. And thank you so much to Vinswept for not knowing we exist. So you haven't put the cease and desist on us. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. And as always,
it's that weird Tuesday energy.
Yeah, it's the weird, that freaky Tuesday power.
I think we might just be weird, Jay. I think it might not be the day of the week.
It might be independent of the day of the week. This
was
Insight
Check.
Should be dead air while I try and remember this word.
Let's talk more about bird fucking.
Let's don't. We there's probably a lot in that early stuff. I'll just trim out.
Okay.
It's fine.
Listen, if you trim out bird fucking, I'm leaving and quitting this
Bird
again.
fucking.
Whoa.
We're not talking about bird fucking anymore.
That's the Easter egg.